Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Social Studies class. Of course, you know by now this is your teacher, Mr. Clarke, and I must say a special welcome to each and everyone. If you are new to the channel, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and subscribe right now. And after you have subscribed, please ensure that you hit that notification bell so that you will be notified each time I post a new video. Alright, please continue to like the videos, guys. Please continue to share them with your friends and your family. And please remember to leave a comment in the comment section so that we know what you think about today's lesson. Alright, now for today's lesson, we are going to be looking at factors that influence population change. Right, so we're looking at changes in the population and the factors that are responsible for those changes. Now, before we delve into those factors, let us first of all remind the viewers what the term population means. Right? Now, population is the total number of people that live in a given country or area at a given time. Right? Let me repeat. The total number of people that live in a given area or country at a given time. Now, the two main components of this definition, the given area and the given time, they are important and should not be left out. Right? So for those persons who are doing a test, right, even if you want to rewrite the definition in your own words, you cannot leave out any of these two components, because population is specific to a country or place, and it is also specific to a year. Right? What that means is that it is highly unlikely for two places or two countries to have the exact same population. It is also unlikely for the population to remain the same over a 2-year span. Right? So population is constantly changing. So that is why we say that the two main components of the definition should not be left out whenever you are defining the term population. Now, when we speak about changes in a population, how does a population change? A population changes in size and in structure. Right? So the two main ways in which a population may change is that it may change in size and also in structure. Now, what do we mean when we say the population changes in size? The population may either increase or it may decrease. Right? In other words, the population may either get more or it may get less. Now, when it changes in structure, that means that the characteristics of the population may change. Right? So when we speak about the characteristics of the population, we're talking about the age distribution, for example. Right? The number of older persons as opposed to or in relation to younger persons. It may also change in the gender distribution, the number of males as opposed to the number of females or in relation to the number of females. It may also change in the dependency ratio. Right? Now, the dependency ratio is basically the number of working people in relation to those persons that have to depend on somebody to provide for them. Right? And the persons that normally fall in the dependency category are younger children and older persons. Right? So in relation to the persons that are working, the persons that make up the labor force, right? So younger children and older persons in one category, they are considered as dependents in relation to persons that are working. Right? So that is basically the dependency ratio. Alright, so first of all, we are going to be looking at the ways in which are the factors that cause the population to change in size. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the population may either increase or it may also decrease. Right? Now, at this point, I think it is important to note that if the population increases to a point where the government or the country is unable to manage, right? Meaning that the population has gotten too large, we refer to this as overpopulation. While if the population decreases substantially, we also refer to this as depopulation. Right, so what are some of the factors that causes the population to change in size? The main factors that causes a population to change in size are the birth rate, the death rate, and migration. Right? Birth rate, death rate, and migration. Now let us look on these individually. What is birth rate? Birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000 people in the population. Right, so let me repeat that. Birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000 people of the population each year. Right, so birth rate is actually an average that is calculated out of every 1,000 persons. So it is different from the actual number of persons or babies that have been born. Right? Birth rate is different from the actual number of babies that are born in a country, because birth rate is actually an average, and as I said before, it is calculated out of every 1,000 persons. Right? Now, what is death rate? Death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 people of the population each year. Right? So again, death rate is actually different from number of deaths, because death rate is an average, it's a rate, right? And it is calculated out of 1,000 people, and the calculation is done annually or per year. Now, in terms of studying death rate and birth rate in relation to changes in the population, both of them have to be looked at in relation to each other. Right, so we have to look on the birth rate in relation to the death rate if we are to understand how they result in changes within the size of the population. Right, because what we're actually trying to figure out is what we refer to as the natural increase. Right, and natural increase is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. So, in other words, we cannot just look on the amount of babies that are born and say it seems as if the population is growing. No. And likewise, we cannot just look on the amount of persons that have died and say the population is decreasing. Both of them have to be looked at in relation to each other, because what we're trying to figure out is the rate at which the population is increasing. Right, or the natural increase of the population. Right, so another way of understanding natural increase is that natural increase is when the birth rate is higher than the death rate. Right, so the birth rate is more or higher than the death rate, then we would say that the country has experienced a natural increase. Now, there are actually mathematical formulas that can be used to calculate birth rate, death rate, and natural increase. So I'm going to go ahead and give you these formulas, because we might be looking at, or we might be doing some maths later on in the class. The formula for birth rate is number of births times 1,000, right? Because remember, it is calculated out of every 1,000 persons. So number of births times 1,000 divided by the total population. Right? While the formula for death rate is similar, number of deaths times 1,000 divided by total population. Right? So for natural increase now, the formula is simple. Birth rate minus death rate. Right? Because remember, we said that natural increase is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. Right? The difference between the birth rate and the death rate. Or in other words, when the birth rate is higher than the death rate, we experience a natural increase. Now let me see if I can assist you in terms of working out these things, right? Now this is an example of how we would work out birth rate, death rate, and natural increase. In country X, 20,000 babies were born in 1998. The country also experienced 10,000 deaths in the same year. The total population for the country is 4 million people. Now, you are expected now to calculate the birth rate, the death rate, and the natural increase. Now, I have chosen some simple figures in this problem, because the idea is really just to show you how to work this out, right? Now, our first task is to set out the problem. So we're going to use our formula and take the information from the problem and set out it in mathematical terms, right? So birth rates, first of all. So it would be 20,000, because 20,000 is the number of babies that were born. 20,000 times 1,000, because we calculate it out of every 1,000 persons. 20,000 times 1,000 over 4 million, or divided by 4 million, because the total population, the size of the population, is 4 million people. Right, so now that you have set out the problem, it is time to work it out. Now, in mathematics, they will teach you that whenever you have so many zeros, and you are dividing, you normally cancel the zeros, right? So if you cancel 1 0 at the bottom, you have to cancel 1 at the top as well, right? So let us go. So you cancel 1 0 from the bottom, you cancel 1 from the top. You cancel another 0 from the bottom, you cancel another 1 from the top. You cancel 1 0 again from the bottom, you cancel 1 from the top. So far we have cancelled 3 zeros from the bottom and the top. So we are left with 20,000 minus 1 at the top so far. We still have more zeros. So you cancel 1 from the 4,000 and you cancel 1 from the 20,000. You cancel another 1 from the bottom, you cancel another 1 from the top. You cancel another 1 from the bottom and another 1 from the top. So right now we are left with 20 times 1 over 4. And we know that 20 times 1 is the same 20. So we're left with 20 over 4. So 4 into 20 equal 5. So therefore, the birth rate is equal to 5. Right? So that is how you work out the birth rate. Now let us move on to the death rate. And as I said before, it is similar. Right? So it would be 10,000 times 1,000 over 4 million. Right, so you can actually count the zeros at the bottom, and so we have 6 zeros at the bottom, so we can cancel 6 from the bottom and 6 from the top. Right, so we would be left with 1 0 at the top, 10. Right, so we're left with 10 at the top and 4 at the bottom. So it is 10 divided by 4, and that will give you 2.5. Right, so the birth rate is 5 and the death rate is 2.5. So the natural increase, as I said, all you do is take away the death rate from the birth rate. So it is 5 minus 2.5, which is 2.5. Right, so the natural increase is 2.5. So what this is saying is that for country X, for every 1,000 persons in the population is increasing by 2.5. Right, so 2.5 is the natural increase. Good. So let us now move on to the other factor that would cause changes in the size of the population. Right, so we're speaking now about migration. Now, what is migration? Migration is the movement of persons or people from one place to another to settle. Right, let me repeat. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another to settle. Now, once you move to settle or to live, it is considered as migration. However, if you go to a place and you have no intentions of living there, right, it is not considered as migration. So once you're going to go back to your original place of residence in a short while, then you would have not migrated, right? That is not considered as migration. So migration is when you move to settle. Another misconception that I see people having about migration is that a lot of people believe that the only time you migrate is when you move from one country to another. But migration can actually be internal or external. So internal migration is when you move from one place to another inside your own country. So for example, in Jamaica, if you move from Westmoreland to Kingston, it is still considered, if you move to live, of course, if you move from Westmoreland to Kingston to live, it is still considered as migration, right? While you also have external migration, which describes movement out of the country, right? So when you move from one country to another country to live, then it is considered to be external migration, right? So those are two different types of migration. Internal migration, meaning you move inside your own country, and external migration. But what we will be focusing on is external migration, because internal migration does not affect the size of the population, right? Because when you move, for example, from St. Ann to Kingston, you are still counted as a member of the population. So the population will not increase in size, neither will it decrease in size, right? So it doesn't affect the size of the population. Now, as it relates to external migration, there are two types. You have immigration and emigration. Immigration and emigration are types of external migration, right? So this means that you are now moving from country to country. You are moving from one country to another to live. Now, in order to understand immigration and emigration, you have to look at it in relation to each other and also in relation to the country in which you are living, right? Because emigration refers to the movement of people from your country to live in another country, right? So when people leave your country to go and live in another country, that is referred to as emigration, right? And you refer to the persons as emigrants, right? While when people move from their country to come into your country to live, it is referred to as immigration, right? So immigration is when persons come into your country, and emigration is when people leave your country, right? Now, as I said earlier, these concepts must be looked on in relation to your country, the country that you are in, because immigrants to you would be immigrants to persons in USA. So if the persons are leaving from Jamaica, for example, and they are going to USA, to you who is living in Jamaica, these persons are immigrants, but to the persons in America, they would be immigrants, right? Likewise, if somebody is leaving from USA to come to Jamaica to live, to the persons in USA, they would be immigrants, while to us in Jamaica, they would be immigrants because they are coming into our country to live. Now, to determine how migration affects changes in the size of the population, we would have to look at the rate of immigration in relation to the rate of emigration, right? Because when you have more immigrants coming in the country than emigrants, meaning the persons that are leaving, it is described as net migration, right? So we refer to this as net migration when we have more people coming into the country than those that are leaving the country. Now, let us now focus on how the population changes in structure, right? Now, as we said earlier, when we talk about structural change to the population, we're talking about changes to the gender ratio, the age distribution, and also the dependency ratio, Right now, what are the factors that are responsible for changes in the structure of the population? The factors that are responsible for the changes in the structure of the population are the fertility rate, the infant mortality rate, and also life expectancy. Right now, let us look on these individually. What is the fertility rate? The fertility rate is the average number of children born to each woman over her lifetime. Right? So the average number of children born to each woman over her lifetime. That's the fertility rate. Now, how does the fertility rate affects the structure of the population? Now, fertility rate may affect the age distribution of a population, because if the fertility rate is high, you are likely to have a large number of children in the country, right? So that will affect the age distribution, because you are likely to have more children in that country than older people, right? So that is the age distribution being affected. Likewise, if the fertility rate is low, that means that women are having a smaller number of children, then you are likely to have more older persons in the population than younger children, right? So that is how fertility rate will affect the structure or changes to the structure of the population. Now, infant mortality is the number of deaths of infants under 1 year old per 1,000 live births, right? Now, infant mortality means that, or I should say, a high infant mortality rate means that you have a lot of young infants or a lot of babies dying before they reach age 1, right? So babies are dying before they reach 1 year old. So if the infant mortality rate is high, that simply means that you are likely to have, again, an old population, right? You are likely to have more older persons in the population than younger persons, because a lot of the infants are dying because you have a high infant mortality rate. While if you have a low infant mortality rate, you are likely to have more younger persons in the population than older persons, right? So the age distribution is likely to change depending on the infant mortality rate. Right now, life expectancy is the average number of years that a person is expected to live for, right? So the average number of years that a person is expected to live within a population. Now, once again, if the life expectancy is high, then you are likely to have a lot of older persons in the population. So again, the age distribution may be affected. While if the life expectancy is low, that simply means that persons are dying at a younger age. So you are likely to have a lot of young persons within that population and fewer old persons within that population. Life expectancy may also affect the dependency ratio, right? Because if the population has a high life expectancy, that simply means that persons are living to a very old age, right? And the more old people you have within a population, the more dependents you have, right? Because remember now, the dependents are younger children that are not of working age and older persons that would have passed retirement, right? So a population that has a high dependency ratio will mean that, a high life expectancy will mean that they have a lot of dependence in the population, because you're likely to have a lot of old persons within the population, right? Once again, life expectancy for males may be different. Life expectancy for males may be different from life expectancy for females. And if the life expectancy for the males is different from the females, right? So let us say, for example, the life expectancy for females is higher than the life expectancy for the males. This may affect the gender ratio of the population, right? So once again, we see where life expectancy would have resulted in changes in the structure of the population, right? So that is where we're going to stop for today. So let us just look on the main points of today's lesson. We said that population is the total number of persons that live in a population. Sorry, let me repeat that. Population is the total number of persons that live in a given area at a given time, right? We also say that a population may change in size and in structure. Now, the factors that result in changes to the size of a population are birth rate, death rate, and migration, while the factors that result in changes to the structure of the population are the fertility rate, the infant mortality rate, and life expectancy. Let me hope that you would have learned something from today's class, and I will see you in the next class.